The Reedy, Set, Grow podcast with Trish Reedy.
Welcome to Reedy, Set, Grow, the podcast that inspires you to grow into the person you are meant to be. I'm your host, Trish Reedy. I'm a local mortgage lender here in Kansas City, and I just love our community and love the people here. We've got so many inspirational stories and people that have done great things. So I'm excited today to bring another great guest, Josh Wolf. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
So Josh and I know each other from the triathlon world, and you do a little coaching, and tell us a little bit about your story, Josh.
Yeah, I like to introduce myself, faith, family first. I've been a coach here for about 15 years, coach athletes, and actually started doing some life coaching as well. It's been phenomenal. One of the things that I love about coaching is the ability to work with people on all levels and help them achieve what they thought they once could not do. Mm-hmm. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Been an athlete myself. I've done multiple Ironmans, done a couple of other, bigger races. I just tried to do a record attempt across Kansas.
Yeah. Tell us more
cool.
about this. I was following you on the socials. So
COVID, I don't know if you know, this has been a thing going on for a while now.
It's just a little thing.
Just a little thing. It happened to take out the endurance racing community as well. So back in March, I was thinking about all the things that I could do rather than focusing on things I cannot. And
that's super important right there.
Yeah.
Like, let's focus on the positive. What can I do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's always been a big thing for me is, figure out what we can do. Anyway, so as I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, I know what's going to happen. Everything's going to be canceled. Everything's, things are not going to be the same. So I remember thinking about this race that I saw this guy do. His name was Ashton. He took this record like 4 years ago, I think. And we were at a coffee shop. My wife and I do a coffee date every Monday.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's been fun too. Follow us on KC Coffee Dates on Instagram.
Oh, that's so cute. We'll get that tagged.
Yeah. So I remember seeing this bike across Kansas, and what it is it's 418 miles from west to east, and it's
so from the Colorado state line to the Missouri state line.
Literally,
okay.
Yes. It's quite a long way. Mm-hmm. And the idea is to try to take it obviously in the fastest time. So there's a whole organization out there that does this. It's the World Cycling Association, and they have a 50-page rule book. So we looked into it and decided,
a lot of rules.
This is something that I can do. This is something that I want to train for. This is something that I want to do for a cause bigger than myself. Yeah.
Okay. And so what was that cause?
Yeah, so suicide awareness and depression awareness was the cause. The reason being is that's something that I've struggled with a lot in my life, and I was thinking,
do many.
Well, right, yeah, especially around now,
right.
And I was thinking about that. Endurance is kind of a lot like that in the sense that you have a struggle, although this one's being picked. And you have to figure out a way to keep moving forward one pedal stroke at a time. Yeah. So what a better way to parallel the two.
Right.
So it was phenomenal. We did not quite get the record. I ended up having a bunch of stomach issues.
Oh, no.
I was throwing up the whole time.
Oh, gosh.
And then the winds did not turn west as they had promised. We won't talk about that. And and it was a lot colder than I expected. So anyway, it was not a win, so to speak, in terms of the goal. However, it was a win in terms of what we were able to do.
Yeah.
So Rediscovering You was our partner, and we raised, I think, around $4,000 for them, which was phenomenal. And again, it was such a great way, I think, to look at the way that it feels sometimes to be in darkness and what you can do, find hope, find that one light that allow you to get through it. Yeah.
So tell us a little more about Rediscovering You.
Yeah, Rediscovering You is a non-for-profit, and this is so insane. I actually didn't even know they existed until 2 months before I was going to do this attempt. I was talking to all these different companies, all these different people, and it just didn't feel right. There was something about it that I didn't really, didn't jive with me each time. And it wasn't that the company was wrong or the organization was wrong. I just had this feeling of like, I want it to be something that's about our community. I want, to like reduce stigma, and I want somebody that's actually gonna be like active and, I know what they're doing. And a friend of mine, Annie, introduced me to them. That's exactly what they do. They break down stigmas. They literally will take people that maybe can't get to an appointment. They'll find transportation for them. They'll pay for them to have therapy.
Wow.
It's phenomenal. So whether it is like, addiction recovery, whether it's a mental illness recovery, whatever it is, they're there for them. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a bit of a history with this. Are you willing to share your personal story?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do too is be vulnerable. I think there's lots of strength in vulnerability.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of things in life that I think we try to keep secret, and I think in darkness that's what it wants us to do, is keep it secret, right? So if you share it, it's great. Anyway, so when I was younger, things were not as pretty as they are now. I didn't look quite the same. I was dressing in all black, eyeliner, darker than yours, way darker than yours, chains and whatnot. And just really despondent, really felt hopeless, felt kind of beat up through life by life. Part of it was just upbringing, alcoholic dad, and just a family life that didn't lend itself well to positivity.
Sure.
And then part of it, I think, was just the way that I interpreted life and my own thought patterns and whatnot. So that got even worse and worse, and things got pretty bad. Turned to drugs for self-therapy, and eventually I decided that wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. However, the pain still lingered.
There. Yeah.
And so what do you do with that? And I was 16 years old. And essentially, I ended up taking my car 70 miles an hour into a tree.
Wow.
And I was trying to end it all. Lots of background behind that. And it was hard. And it was obviously, I was at my lowest of lows.
Absolutely. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so there's so many things around this. I ended up actually hitting a guardrail first. And the guardrail threw me into this tree. It was one tree. It was actually at 435 in Metcalf, if you're local. Back in, I was early, mid-90s. And that was the only tree that was there. Behind that were apartment complexes. So I hit the only tree that was there. And I hit it dead on in the center. And then instead of me going through the windshield, I hit the steering wheel. Instead of the branches coming in, they went around us. I mean, it was just insane. Like the number of things that happened that kept me alive. So I remember hitting the steering wheel, and then I remember waking up and I heard the ambulance, and I was clearly still here.
Yeah.
So I've always been stubborn, always been highly determined, and I was almost like unscathed. I ended up having a compressed fracture in my back, but given everything, I mean, that was nothing, right?
Yeah.
So I got up and I asked people, why didn't I die? Why didn't I die? Nobody could give me an answer. So I started to run, and when I got to a fence, I tried to jump it, and this guy stopped me. I thought he lived behind there. I don't know what he was doing there now. And I said, why didn't I die? Why didn't I die? And he looked at me in the eye and said, because God has a special plan for you. And I just kind of dropped to my knees, and I believed it.
Wow.
And so for me, a lot of work has gone on the past 20 years to get to where I'm at. And there's all kinds of things that I'd love to share about that, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, please. Yeah. This is very interesting.
The first is sometimes our biggest weakness can become our biggest strength. And I might just sideline that for a second and come back to it. The second is that when I came out of that, I realized that, yes, there's all these things happening to me. However, my thought process is completely skewed. So the way that I think about the world, the way that I process, whenever anything would not go the way I thought, like it would internally drag me down.
Sure.
As a kid, I was actually dyslexic, and definitely was eventually diagnosed with like a processing disorder.
Okay.
However, I don't think it was ever correctly diagnosed. I remember as a kid, I'd like read, and I would be super nervous because like I couldn't really understand what was going on. So if I was going to read something, like I'm pointing to your notes, I wouldn't know like what it was going to say. So I would be apprehensive and like not anxious. So I'd be telling myself all these things about like who I was in that and what I felt like. And, it was not pleasant, right?
Not positive self-talk.
Not at all, right? Yeah. Why would it be? And like I noticed that was kind of my pattern in my entire life. So like right now, like if I were looking at you, I don't know what you're thinking, and like I would assume that you're thinking, oh, what he's talking about is dumb. What he's talking about doesn't make any sense. He's just rambling on. Like my thought pattern would be.
For the record, that's not at all what I'm thinking.
Yeah, but I'm just, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
is like that's what it was. So I think this is so cool that we have the opportunity to change that.
Yeah.
And like neurologically, we have the opportunity to change that. And science has proven that, you know, synapses can be rerouted,
right,
can be changed. I didn't know that as a kid. I just knew that I didn't really want to do that anymore, right? So I came up with a way to change the way that I thought. So the first was observe what it is that I'm thinking, right? And then I get to decide if that is truly something that I believe or I don't want to believe. And then I get to reframe. So those are kind of the steps that I took. So all of that to say that whenever I look at like my past, like it gave me this opportunity to be able to like really go deep into my thought process and constantly evaluate it if it's the truth or if it's what I want to think. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, you can let someone tell you who you are. You can decide for yourself. And, you know, there's so many different ways to look at one thing. I mean, you look at my pencil, right? And you're going to describe it in one way. I'm going to describe it in another. The pencil thinks of itself, this was a person, in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And you get to choose your own narrative, right? You get to choose.
Sure.
You get to choose what's true about yourself.
For sure. I think though, like one of the things that we don't notice though is that we're having these thoughts. They're so quick. So our subconscious has already made the decision of what we're going to say before we think that we're going to say it.
Yep.
And the trick is to be able to catch it before it spirals. So what it used to do is your thought becomes your emotion, becomes your behavior, becomes who you are, right?
Right.
So what it used to do to me is my thought would automatically dictate like who I was, and I would have a negative emotion around it. So I would feel the anxiety, I would feel the depression, the hopelessness. And it's not how I want to feel. Like nobody wants to feel like that.
Right.
Anybody that you talk to, they don't want to feel depressed. A lot of times you just feel stuck. You feel like
especially when you're in it, when you're in that dark place, it's hard to change.
It's the worst.
And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery and a lot of vulnerability and strength to go get help.
Oh, for sure. And that was one thing I wanted to say is make no matter what, I mean, I didn't do it alone. I did have to go.
You can't
go get help, so to speak. And what they did not provide, I was able to make up, which was so helpful. Like what I mean by make up, I was able to substitute with the thought pattern changes. Yeah. So
man,
it's been again a journey, so to speak. So
what happened after that?
What happened after what?
So you had this crash.
Yeah.
You realize I didn't die. I was supposed to die. And then.
Oh, yeah.
And then this man tells you God has a plan for you.
Yeah.
Do you know who this man was? Have you ever met him? Or?
So I went back after I was out to look at the police report because I wanted to see the address or the phone number and find this guy and say, hey, thanks for that. That was so encouraging. And the police report did not have a phone number. It didn't have an address. It didn't have a last name. It had one first name. His name was Christian. And that was it. So.
Isn't it ironic?
Man. Right. Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, I really did. So I think what it did for me is it gave me a grounding spot.
Yeah.
Like it did not change overnight. Like it took, it continues to take work and years of like you said, working through it.
Yeah.
Right. What it did is allow me to have that one foundation that like, that's a truth. Like any time I go, if I ever got to that spot again, I could know that, and thankfully I haven't been. This is my truth.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
So since then, your life has changed a lot. You're obviously not in black chains and black eyeliner, and you've gotten into endurance sports.
Sure.
And tell us a little bit about that and the impact of that on your life.
Yeah, it's been so cool. Whenever I was going through that, all of my behaviors were negative. I need something to do. I should go lift weights. So I did. And as a kid, I was lifting weights and doing that kind of stuff. And a friend of mine, his name's Paul, I always give him a shout out. He introduced me to mountain biking and running and whatnot when I was a senior. I'm like, oh, that's kind of fun. So fast forward, I was in college, I was lifting weights. At this time, I was being pretty serious about it, if you will, right? Lifting 100-pound dumbbells, and I was a major in kinesiology.
Yeah. I
had decided that's kind of what I want to do. I like the human body and like studying the way that it works and whatnot. And I was like, what am I doing? I need a goal. I should run a marathon. Because that's logical, right?
Right, because that's the first thing that you do. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Only crazy people, right?
Well, and I do have quite a bit of crazy.
Right.
So I called him and, hey, you want to do this? Yeah, I've always wanted to do that. We did train for it, so don't worry.
You weren't too crazy.
Yeah. So we spent 6 months training for this thing, and I just loved it. I loved what endurance felt like. I loved the outlet. I loved actually, and I continue, this is what I like the most about it, is it teaches you those skills that you can apply to everything in life,
gosh.
right?
Yeah.
And you've done these big races too. So like, the consistency, it teaches you the determination. It teaches you to do things that you now do that once you thought you could not do.
Yeah.
So like when you start out running a marathon, and a marathon's 26 miles.
Point two.
Yeah, 26.2. Point two. Always point two.
That's the hard part, right?
It is. The very first time that you run, you might run 3 miles. You might run 2 miles or whatever.
You might walk.
You might walk whenever you first start training for these things, right? And then like 6 miles seems so unreasonable. It seems out there. It's impossible. There's no way you can do it.
Yeah.
And then you look back and 6 miles is now your easy run. So how much in life could be your easy run that seems impossible now? Right. So those are the types of things that I just love about it.
Yeah.
And so that's
that one conversation that you've been wanting to have with your boss that just seems too hard. If you can train for it and practice and get there, then that hard conversation isn't hard anymore. Right?
Oh, for sure. Or things that you want to achieve in life.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes we quit before we try. I always tell people, don't quit before you try. We have to be able to show up. The hardest step is the first step. It always is. Most people never take the first step. So actually by taking one step forward, you're 80% more likely to achieve anything. Like,
Yeah. Which would you rather have? Did not start or did not finish your race?
Absolutely.
I mean,
so those, I just fell in love with that, right? And that's around the same time when I was in college. I don't know, maybe this dates me now. I always thought of myself as young, and every year it gets less like that.
Yeah.
Lance Armstrong was big, and he was big into cycling, and he most certainly made a big impact on the cycling in the United States.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh man, that's biking. That's cool. I should bike. So I bought a bicycle and started riding all the time. So then my friend's like, hey Josh, you should do a triathlon. And I'm like, okay, what is that? And it's a swim, bike, run. That sounds phenomenal. Let's do that.
Cool. Why not?
Right? Yeah. By this time I'm out of college and I do my first triathlon. I think it's like a 400 swim and then 400 meter swim. It was outside. Then like a 12-mile bike and then a 3-mile run or whatever. And I remember I had to do like the backstroke and the side stroke.
Whatever it takes to get through.
Some
form little doggy paddle.
Yeah. And then I got through and I did really well. I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And then that was the first of many.
That was, I've done now over 100 triathlons. I've done, I think, 8 Ironmans, qualified for Kona 6 times, which is the Ironman World Championships. We've gone twice.
What's your PR?
Grateful to be able to go.
Personal record.
So, an Ironman 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, 26.2
mile run.
I think my PR right now, is, 1914, something like that. But... For me, it's more about like what's going on inside the race, Yeah,
man. Well, that's super inspirational. And I mean, to go from the lowest of lows to qualifying for the World Championships in Hawaii is such a journey.
Oh my gosh.
I'm so thankful that you came on and shared it with us.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing?
Yes,
Is that
please.
Okay?
Of course.
Yeah. Super grateful to be able to even do that. I feel like all points above for me personally. And I was talking about your biggest weakness can become your biggest strength.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things I said. And I think that is like the biggest takeaway is that sometimes we feel like, whatever it is, we feel like we're not enough. We feel like we can't do something. we feel like maybe the world is against us. When you break it down and you look at the struggle within that allows you to be who you are. You know what I mean? So sometimes what seems as if it's like the world coming down on you, it can eventually be something that you use for a greater good, Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
I know.
Man, that's a lot.
Yeah.
It's something that can be the hardest thing, the worst thing, can turn you into the best thing.
It really can.
Yeah. Wow. Man, well, I'm going to leave you listeners with that. Think about what's your hardest thing and has it turned you into the best that you can be? And I'd like to thank you, Josh, for coming on our show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
And thank you all for tuning in. This has been Reedy, Set, Grow.
The Reedy, Set, Grow podcast with Trish Reedy.